let's talk about how to build out your vegetable garden. There's many ways to do it. And one of the key differences I see in how you could set up your vegetable garden is either doing raised beds or in ground. And perhaps you want both. There are advantages and disadvantages depending on where you are and your budget. When we bought our house in the North Georgia mountains, we noticed that everyone's vegetable gardens were in ground. And when we move up there and build out our new homestead, I'm going to dive more into detail as to why that is. But I can tell you in an urban setting, there's many advantages to having raised beds. The first is that you can pick your soil. So here in New Orleans, we have heavy clay soils and a high water table. So a lot of our vegetables that are not natively grown or traditionally grown in this habitat would be swallowed up with terrible drainage, an influx of disease, and not have the potential to prosper. With raised beds, you can pick your soil, and we will be getting more into how to choose your soil. Another benefit to having raised beds is that drainage, is being able to choose a soil with proper drainage so that way you're not getting a backup of water and plants getting that terrible start with too much water surrounding their roots. Another reason why I love raised beds is because it's so much easier on your back. I can squat like this, look up and see what's going on with my plants. I can harvest easily and I'm not having to bend my back over. So the raised beds have definitely been a huge help to my physical health. If you go with raised beds, you're gonna wanna have them in lines for sake of irrigation because you will be running pipes and have them come up in each and every one of your beds. And so having them in rows is extremely convenient for the sake of irrigation. In terms of bed size, you really have flexibility with this. I will say that an 8-foot by 4-foot bed is a nice size bed that you can access all sides. I would definitely stick to a bed no wider than 4 feet for the sake of being able to access it on all sides. The only exception to this would be if you had an in-ground bed where you were growing something on a large scale like corn that needs to be pollinated by wind, in which case you would have a large in-ground bed, very wide to have multiple rows of corn, but you would still have walkways in between each row. How tall should your beds be? Well, roots need a solid 15 inches of soil, and so at a very minimum, your bed should be 15 inches tall. But I will say that ever since I adopted a 2-foot tall bed, I would never look back, solely for the sake of being able to squat comfortably and access my plants comfortably without hurting my back. If you go with anything taller than 15 inches, you can implement a strategy called hugelkultur, and that is where you layer large logs and branches, and then you might do another layer of leaves, and then your soil, which you would want 15 inches of. I love the hugelkultur method because it saves money on soil, and it's going to naturally build up a healthy soil microbiome where all the decomposers are going to come up from the ground up and give you a solid foundation in soil. So what sort of materials should you consider when building out your edible garden? It's going to be different for raised beds or in-ground. In-ground is going to be much simpler. For raised beds, you have many options. First, there's the obvious wood. And the biggest mistake I see people make with wooden raised beds is using untreated fence boards. Those are half an inch thick, and especially without any further treatment, they're probably going to last you a few years. That was actually how I built my first set of raised beds, and lo and behold, they completely eroded and broke down after 3 years. And that was when I switched to these 2-inch thick copper treated southern yellow pine. Now, when it comes to treated wood, you have to be careful because whatever is touching your soil will leach into your plants and into your food. Copper is an organic, natural fungicide that we can even use in the garden on our plants for fungal infection. And the copper azole treatment that I had on this southern yellow pine was completely non-toxic and safe. So that's why I chose it. You can search for a local lumber yard in your area and find out what wood they have. But I will say this, if you're gonna go with wood, you wanna do a 2-inch thick piece of wood. If you have 2 inches thick and you treat it organically each year with a non-toxic stain or oil, that wood could last you up to 10 years, which might be a good option for many of y'all. Lumber also right now is really expensive. And so typically when I would look to lumber as a less expensive natural option, right now in 2022, that's not necessarily the best case financially. When I rebuilt my beds, I got these steel corner posts from Gardener Supply, linked in my favorite products link on my website. And I liked these corners because it was easy to build these beds and put them together. They were just immediately straight. I just had to lock them into place. I did get them taller because originally I didn't have a fence to separate my chickens, and I had little mini fences around each bed, which was cumbersome and kind of in the way. So you can get a sense of how thick these boards are and these metal corners. Now, I have stained these for the most part annually. I think I may have skipped a year or two, but beds like these will last a solid 10 years. Now look over here. I wish that I had put a little 2x4 in the center to help prevent this bowing out. So this is just one of the things that can happen with lumber, especially if you don't put the right support. These beds are 4x8. These beds are my favorite beds. These are a stainless steel bed by Birdies, and they sell many different shapes, a few different colors. And at my next homestead, I am interested in doing my raised beds out of Birdies for the sake of having one, just a really easy to put together raised bed. I like the look of them, and these are going to last way longer than these. The least expensive option for growing food is growing everything in ground, which might not be the best option for you. But if you're limited on funds, all you need for in-ground beds is some cardboard and compost, and we're gonna go over that process at the next Dream property.